I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who gets blindsided by his wife's infidelity. I always believed we had something special, something that wouldn't break so easily. My name is Jake, and I'm about to share the worst chapter of my life. Sarah and I met in college, and from the beginning it felt right. We were the couple that friends envied. We laughed together, fought together, and built a life filled with dreams. It was a comfortable life, and I thought we were in it for the long haul. We married 3 years after graduation and settled into a cozy house in a suburb of Denver. But like all good stories, there were warning signs. Over the past few months, I noticed changes. Little things at first. She started spending more time out with friends. Her phone seemed glued to her hand, and there were nights she'd come home smelling of different colognes. I brushed it off, convincing myself that life was simply pulling her in different directions. Surely her flirtation with a new group of friends couldn't mean anything nefarious, right? One Saturday night, I decided to surprise her. I got home early from work, excited to spend some quality time together. When I walked into our living room, I was taken aback. There she was, Sarah, sitting on the lap of some guy I'd never seen before. It was as if time froze. They were laughing, sharing a bottle of wine, and the sight of her leaning into him felt like a punch to the gut. My heart raced as I took a step forward, only to hear her giggle. That familiar sound that had once made me feel complete now twisted my insides. Suddenly, I stood up and walked away. I needed air anywhere but there. I drove to a nearby park and sat there, staring into the abyss of my thoughts. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. Was I really the last to know? The image of Sarah flirting with that guy kept replaying in my head like a broken record. It gnawed at me, and the anger bubbled just beneath the surface. After a sleepless night, I decided to confront her. I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I needed answers. When I walked into our house the next day, she was still in bed, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. With my heart pounding, I asked her about last night. She laughed it off, claiming it was nothing more than a silly game with friends. "Jake, you're overthinking this," she said with that dismissive tone that used to infuriate me. "He's just a buddy from work. We were joking around, that's all." But I wasn't fooled. As the excuses spilled from her lips, I felt my blood boil. I didn't want to shout or rage, but every word felt like a slap. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. I remembered the vows we took and the trust we built, now shattered by her lies. It was then that I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Should I fight for a marriage that had begun to feel more like a contract than a partnership? Or should I walk away? My heart felt heavy, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. I needed time to figure it all out. The emotional toll was overwhelming: shock, anger, sadness, and a sense of betrayal that felt too much to bear. I could hardly recognize the woman I had loved and trusted. As the days passed, I found myself spiraling into a dark place where I felt the suffocating grip of despair. I had to make a choice: continue living a lie or confront the harsh reality and find a way to move forward. I always believed in love, but now I questioned everything I thought I knew about it. The ball was in my court, and the next move would define my life. As I sat with the weight of betrayal hanging over me, I knew I had to gather my thoughts before making any decisions. The world felt upside down, and every place I looked reminded me of Sarah, the good times, the laughter, and now the deceit. I spent hours at the park, replaying the events of the last few weeks and trying to make sense of it all. I felt like I was in a fog, struggling to see clearly. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of life: work, chores, the obligatory small talk with Sarah, but inside I was a tempest. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she had let on. That nagging intuition wouldn't let me rest, and I began to investigate. I started going through her social media and texts, looking for clues behind her behavior. It felt dirty, like I was invading her privacy, but I justified it as a way to protect myself. One evening, I found her phone left unattended on the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I picked it up. I felt like a detective, piecing together a puzzle that was starting to reveal its dark picture. I scrolled through her messages, and there it was, a thread of flirty texts between her and that guy from the party. The kind of text that made my stomach churn, filled with playful banter and suggestive emojis. I felt bile rise in my throat as I read their exchanges, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. She had been lying right to my face. I put the phone down, trying to catch my breath. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance of rage and sorrow. I felt betrayed not just by her infidelity, but by the years of trust we had built. The woman I thought I knew was unraveling before me, and I couldn't recognize the person staring back at me in the mirror. I decided it was time to confront her again. This time I wouldn't let her brush it off. I needed to hear the truth and see her reaction when faced with the evidence. That evening I knew she would be home late from her yoga class, so I waited. The anticipation felt like a countdown to a bomb about to detonate. When she walked in, radiant and blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me, I seized the moment. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos within. She looked surprised, maybe even a little wary, but the feigned innocence quickly melted away as I pulled out her phone and displayed the messages. "What is this?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. Her face paled as she realized what I was holding. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. "Not what it looks like," I echoed, my voice rising with the enormity of what I had uncovered. "You're flirting with some guy while I'm here working my ass off for us, and you say it's not what it looks like? What the hell, Sarah?" She opened her mouth, ready to spew out excuses, but I wasn't having it. "You think I'm just going to sit here and let you lie to my face? You're not the innocent girl I married. You've been playing me for a fool." Tears welled in her eyes, and in that moment I felt a flicker of regret deep within me. I didn't want to see her cry, but I reminded myself of the pain she had caused me. She was the one who had made this choice. "Please, Jake, I can explain," she pleaded. "Explain what?" I shot back, my voice dripping with disbelief. "The fun you're having behind my back, the secrets you're keeping. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry for trusting you, because I'm done being the fool?" The confrontation spiraled from there, with her trying to downplay everything and me refusing to buy her half-hearted apologies. She claimed it was just a fling, something to help her feel alive again. I felt sick. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. Instead, I stood there feeling the final shreds of our relationship slip away. I was angry, I was hurt, but most of all I was done. I realized I had two choices: to keep fighting for someone who clearly didn't want me anymore, or to take my dignity and walk away. The decision felt monumental. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the love that had been twisted into something ugly. That night, I made my choice. I would no longer allow myself to be a pawn in someone else's game. I deserved better, and it was time to reclaim my life. The emotional impact of her betrayal would linger, but I was ready to move forward, no matter how painful it felt in the moment. The decision to confront Sarah about her infidelity had felt liberating in the moment, but as I sat in the silence of our home after the explosion of anger and tears, I realized that the hardest part was yet to come: actually leaving. I had made my choice, but I was now faced with the logistics of it all. It wasn't just packing my bags and walking out. It was untangling the life we had built together. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I hardly spoke to Sarah. It was as if we were living in two separate worlds under the same roof. I went to work, trying to drown myself in tasks and deadlines, but my mind would wander back to the confrontation. I replayed her excuses over and over, but they never got any better. How could someone I loved so deeply betray me so easily? I started packing my things in secret. I had a close friend, Mike, who had always been supportive, and I confided in him about the situation. He urged me to take my time and think things through, but I knew my heart was set. The friendship we had was built on trust, loyalty, and respect, all of which I felt were lacking in my marriage. We would be better off apart. As the days passed, I felt more and more like a stranger in my own home. Sarah tried to reach out and talk, but I was done listening to her excuses. I couldn't bear to hear her insist that it was just a bad phase, or that she had been stressed out and needed someone. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it away like it meant nothing. Finally, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer stand the tension. One night I decided it was time to have another conversation, not to argue but to lay everything out on the table. I approached her in the living room. Sarah, I said slowly, we need to talk about what's next. Her eyes seemed to widen with hope, but I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. I'm leaving and I think it's for the best. I can't do this anymore. The look on her face was a mix of shock and disbelief. You can't be serious. Jake, we can work this out. I can change. I love you. Do you really? I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the storm inside. You love me enough to flirt with another man while I'm at work. You love me enough to lie and manipulate. This isn't love and we both know it. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but I cut her off. I've made my decision. I'm not going to keep hurting myself waiting for you to come to your senses. I'm leaving. Her demeanor shifted from desperation to anger. So you're just going to throw everything away, just like that? You think you'll find happiness out there? I don't know what I'll find, but I know this isn't it. Staying here is just going to keep breaking me down. I deserve more than what you've given me, I replied, feeling solid in my resolve. With that, I walked away from the conversation. I felt lighter, but there was still a heavy weight on my chest. The emotional toll of leaving someone I once cared for so deeply was palpable, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. Over the next few days, I finalized my plans. I booked a small apartment nearby, thinking it would give me space to breathe and figure out my next steps. I was still in shock at how quickly life had turned in such a dark direction. I hardly had time to mourn the relationship because I was busy dealing with the logistics of moving out. When the weekend came, I began packing up my things. Even the act of putting my belongings into boxes felt surreal. Everything I touched brought back memories, moments of laughter, joy, and love now overshadowed by betrayal. I felt like I was stripping our life down to its bare essentials, and it was painful. The day I moved out was bittersweet. I stood in the empty apartment, looking at the boxes stacked in the living room, and took a deep breath. This was my fresh start, my escape from the pain, but it was also a reminder of what I had lost. As I closed the door behind me for the last time, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I was ready to embrace the unknown, even if it was terrifying. I had learned a harsh lesson about love and trust, and while it hurt, I was determined to rebuild. My phone rang. It was Mike. "Hey man, just checking in. How are you holding up?" "Better, I think," I replied, forcing a smile even though he couldn't see me. "I moved out today." "Good for you, man. You deserve to find happiness." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, I just need some time to figure things out. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you," he said, and I felt a small flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this after all. I had someone to lean on and I could start to heal. The journey ahead was daunting, but I was ready to reclaim my life. The first few weeks in my new apartment were a whirlwind of emotions. I was trying to navigate a life without Sarah, and it felt both liberating and agonizing. Every corner of the small space reminded me of what I had lost, yet it was also a blank canvas for what could be. I kept the essentials: a bed, a couple of chairs, and a table, but not much else. I didn't want to surround myself with the past. At first, I spent my evenings just sitting in silence, staring at the walls. I didn't have any friends nearby, and I hadn't yet found my rhythm. I had gone from living in a bustling home to a quiet, empty apartment, and the silence was deafening. I missed the sound of laughter, even if it was just a reminder of the pain. I found myself drifting back to memories of Sarah, our late-night talks, the warmth of her hand in mine, and the dreams we had shared. It was hard to let go, and the emotional impact of the betrayal lingered like a shadow. One evening, having had enough of the stillness, I decided to call Mike. "Hey, you free to hang out?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Absolutely. Let's grab some food." "I'll be there in 20, he replied, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I needed a distraction, something to take my mind off the emptiness. When Mike arrived, he brought a pizza and an enthusiasm that was contagious. We sat on the floor, boxes scattered around us, and dug into the greasy slices. "Dude, this is your place now. You can decorate however you want. You should paint the walls a crazy color or something." "Yeah, I was thinking about going with a calm-down beige," I replied with a chuckle, not really feeling adventurous yet. He nodded sagely. "Fair enough. Just remember, this is your chance to make a fresh start. You don't need to be tied to the past anymore." As we talked, I began to feel a sense of normalcy creeping back into my life. We reminisced about college days, our wild adventures, and the ridiculous things we did when we were young and carefree. It felt good to laugh again, and I realized how important it was to have a support system. Over the next few weeks, I continued to find my footing. I started going to the gym, trying to take care of myself both physically and mentally. Each workout felt like a release, a way to channel my anger and sadness into something productive. I also took up cooking, experimenting with simple recipes that I had never bothered to try before. It felt good to reclaim those small parts of my life that I had given up while I was with Sarah. But while I was actively working on moving forward, the shadows of my past still lingered. I found myself checking social media less frequently and avoiding the places Sarah and I used to frequent. I had to remind myself that healing was a process, and it was okay to take it one day at a time. One night, as I was flipping through channels, I stumbled upon a documentary about relationships. It focused on how to recognize red flags and the importance of communication in love. I sat there, transfixed, absorbing every word. It was as if it was speaking directly to me, and I began reflecting on my own relationship with Sarah. I had ignored red flags. I had dismissed my gut feelings about her changing behavior. Perhaps if I had communicated my concerns earlier, things could have been different. It was hard to accept that I had been complacent, but the experience taught me the importance of honesty, not just with others but with myself. I started journaling my thoughts and feelings, a new way to process everything that had happened. Writing became a form of therapy, allowing me to let out emotions that I had bottled up for too long. I poured my heart out on the pages, detailing the heartbreak and betrayal, but also the hope I felt for the future. Then one day, while I was at the coffee shop down the street, I bumped into an old college friend, Jenna. She was still the same vibrant person I remembered, with a smile that lit up the room. We exchanged pleasantries and ended up chatting for over an hour. It felt good to connect with someone who didn't know the details of my recent heartbreak, someone who treated me like the Jake I used to be. As we talked, I learned that Jenna had recently gone through her own tough breakup. We exchanged stories and discovered we had a lot in common. A friendship blossomed as we shared our experiences and leaned on each other for support. It was refreshing to have someone to talk to who understood the emotional turmoil that came with a relationship ending. As weeks turned into months, I started to feel like myself again. I was still carrying the scars from my marriage, but I was finding ways to heal. I learned that it was okay to feel pain and sadness, but I also learned that I had the power to create a new narrative for my life. I began to embrace the unknown, looking forward to what my future held. I was open to new experiences, new friendships, and even the potential for love again someday. The road to healing wasn't straightforward, but I was determined to walk it with my head held high, ready to reclaim my happiness. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, I realized that healing isn't just about moving forward, it's also about redefining who you are. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my past decisions, what I could have done differently, and what I needed to embrace moving forward. With each passing day, I felt more empowered and in control of my destiny. The budding friendship with Jenna was refreshing. She brought a spark back into my life that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We started hanging out more often, grabbing coffee, attending local events, and even going on hikes. It felt good to connect with someone on a platonic level without the weight of past baggage weighing us down. I found myself laughing again, a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like ages. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to check out a local art festival. It was bustling with energy, colorful displays, the sound of laughter, and the intoxicating smell of street food. As we wandered through the booths, I felt alive. It was a stark contrast to the gloomy days I had spent wallowing in my old apartment. "Let's take a picture in front of that mural," Jenna suggested, pointing to a vibrant painting depicting a swirling galaxy. We posed together, and as I held her close, I felt a flutter in my chest, an unfamiliar feeling that brought a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the weeks turned into months, there were moments when I felt the urge to reach out to Sarah, but I never did. I had to remind myself why I left and the importance of keeping my distance. I had to break the cycle of pain and make sure I was truly moving forward. That chapter of my life was done, and it was time to turn the page. One evening, as I sat at home journaling, I received a text from Sarah. My heart raced when I saw her name flash on my screen. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. It read, "Hey Jake, can we talk? I really need to apologize and explain myself." A whirlwind of emotions struck me. Part of me was angry for even considering her request, while another part felt a flicker of curiosity. I took a deep breath and decided to respond. "I'm not sure what we could talk about that would change anything, Sarah." She replied almost immediately, asking if we could meet in person. I was torn. I had built a new life for myself, and I didn't know if I wanted to risk shaking that foundation. But I was also aware that unresolved feelings could linger indefinitely if I didn't face them. After debating with myself for hours, I finally agreed to meet her. We decided on a small cafe, a neutral place where I wouldn't feel trapped. When I arrived, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. I had come too far to let her manipulate my feelings again, but I also knew that confronting the past might be necessary for complete closure. When Sarah walked in, she looked different, more subdued, almost fragile. Her usual confidence was replaced with hesitation. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, and it stirred something in me. I remembered the woman I had fallen in love with, but that was a long time ago. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, taking a seat across from me. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I've been doing a lot of thinking." "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "About us. About what happened. I've realized how selfish I was. I thought I could have my cake and eat it too, but I lost the best thing I ever had, our marriage." I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. Part of me wanted to rail against her and demand how she could even think she deserved to hold my attention. Yet another part of me recognized that she was in pain too, and perhaps this was just as hard for her. "I understand if you don't want to hear this," she continued, "but I'm really sorry for how I treated you. I was immature and I hurt you deeply. I've been working on myself, going to therapy and trying to figure out why I made those choices." "Therapy," I repeated, surprised by the revelation. "You didn't seem interested in doing any of that when we were together." "I know, and that's part of my problem," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I took you for granted. I couldn't see what I had until it was gone. I'm not expecting forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry." I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to say, "You don't get to come back into my life now and expect everything to be okay." But I also realized that holding onto anger wouldn't heal my wounds. Perhaps this apology was part of the closure I needed. "I appreciate you saying that." I finally responded, my voice steady but guarded. "But I can't go back. I've worked hard to move on. I'm rebuilding my life, and I'm not ready to revisit the past." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. I just needed you to know that I was wrong. You deserve happiness, Jake." We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our thoughts. I felt some weight lift off my shoulders, but it was bittersweet. I had forgiven her in my heart long ago, but I also knew that forgiveness didn't mean I had to let her back into my life. As we finished our coffees, I stood up to leave, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had faced her, confronted my feelings, and emerged stronger. I turned to her one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, and walked away. Leaving that cafe felt like closing a chapter that didn't need to be reopened. I had finally accepted the past, and now I could truly move forward without the lingering shadows of my former life. With each step away from her, I felt lighter. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that my heart was healing and my future was bright. As I walked away from that cafe, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The confrontation with Sarah had given me the closure I didn't know I desperately needed. It was like a fog had lifted, and for the first time in months I could see the bright horizon ahead of me. I was ready to embrace my life, unencumbered by the past. In the weeks that followed, I continued to focus on my new life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and deepened my friendship with Jenna. Our connection blossomed as we supported each other through our respective journeys. Each outing, each laugh, and each shared moment became a stepping stone toward my healing. I started volunteering at a local nonprofit, helping at-risk youth with mentoring. Engaging with the kids opened my heart in unexpected ways. I found joy in seeing their faces light up when they learned something new. It reminded me of the pure happiness that comes from connections built on trust and respect. I realized that while my marriage had crumbled, my ability to care and love was still very much alive. One evening, Jenna and I went to a concert in the park. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and music that brought people together. As we danced and sang along, I felt a shift within me. I was no longer the heartbroken man trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. I was a man reclaiming his joy. I caught Jenna's eye, and in that moment it was clear that something special was brewing. It was subtle at first, a shared glance, a lingering touch, and the comfortable warmth of her presence, but it blossomed into something deeper. We began dating, and I found myself laughing more than I had in years. With her, I could be myself without the weight of my past hanging over us. Jenna didn't know the depths of my pain until I chose to share, and she listened without judgment, providing support and encouragement. As the months rolled on, I learned that healing isn't linear. There were days when memories of Sarah would creep in, reminding me of the hurt. But I learned to acknowledge those feelings rather than let them define me. I had come to understand that it was okay to feel pain. It was part of the process of moving forward. One weekend, Jenna and I took a trip to the mountains. The fresh air and breathtaking views were invigorating, and as we hiked together, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. At the summit, with the sun setting in a golden blaze, I turned to her and shared the journey I had been on. I spoke of my heartbreak and the lessons I had learned about trust and love. "Thank you for being patient with me," I said, feeling grateful for her presence in my life. "You've shown me that it's possible to feel joy again." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Jake. I'm just glad I get to be a part of your new chapter." As we stood together, the world stretching infinitely before us, I realized that I had shifted from a place of hurt to one of hope. I was still on the road to recovery, but I had found strength in vulnerability and in the power of new connections. I had learned to trust again, both in myself and in others. Back in my apartment, I looked around at the space I had created for myself. It was filled with reminders of my healing journey, framed pictures from hikes with Jenna, my journal filled with thoughts and reflections, and artwork that spoke to my newfound appreciation for life. I was proud of where I had come from and excited about where I was headed. I had walked away from a marriage that had betrayed me, and in doing so, I had walked toward a life filled with possibilities. I learned that while love can hurt, it can also heal. I learned that it's never too late to rewrite your story, to embrace change, and to open your heart again. Looking back, I would tell anyone in a similar situation that it's okay to feel lost, it's part of the journey, but never lose sight of your worth. In the midst of heartbreak, remember that joy is waiting for you on the other side. Seek it out, embrace it, and don't be afraid to love again. Life is too precious to waste on what once was. Move forward, reclaim your happiness, and always believe in the power of new beginnings.